I think architecture takes itself too seriously. That I have no doubt. But I always thought that there is, with the work of Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin, that there is a critique and a very edgy social critique in the way they use their body, the way they almost incorporate other mechanisms to make them look ridiculous. So I'm very interested in that, in how you can be critical of architecture through humor. Not hit it hard, straight hard, because I think I'm within the discipline. So somehow if you use humor, I think there is something a little bit subversive, where people laugh at it, they're not quite sure what you're being critical of, but in an unconscious way, they know that something wasn't right or that something needs to change. I'm very interested in the way that people share space and somehow begin to negotiate that space. I think public space is not something that is given, but it's something that needs to be conquered. You have to claim it. So I thought about this bench. It would be a sort of medium between 2, 3, 4 people, where the more people that begin to use it, the more stable it gets. So it's the idea that public space is not like my little space as long as you don't interfere. Like it can be both of our spaces, but just don't interfere in mine. This one, it actually, the more people come here, the more public it becomes, the more efficient it becomes. So I like this idea of public space should be not for many individuals, but for many collectives. So to me, this was like a small little tool that would say, hey, the more people you get involved, the better it works. I've always been fascinated by the situationist and this idea that they walk the city at the pace of a turtle, almost as a way of being really slow and taking their time to look at the city. So I myself am always with my Polaroid taking pictures of the city, and these little notes, these urban notes, become influences for my work. So at a point I started thinking that when I was taking the Polaroids, these were just images or 2D notations, 2-dimensional notations. So I wanted to do a garment that could be something that I could take notes from the city, but that I could actually begin to take certain objects. And that those objects, so I put a series of pockets, different, some with buttons, some with zippers, some small, some big, some with a certain capacity to be overburdened by the object. It was a way of me beginning to collect these objects again as an archaeologist, trying to find this evidence of what happens in the city. But as I begin to collect them, the garment begins to take a new shape, and to me it was a way of saying the city changes me. I cannot continue to think that I am the same person, at least in a very physical way. I am beginning to be bulkier and fuller and maybe with more weight. So to me it talked about that, the piece. I don't know if the piece itself it's practical or that it really collects things that might be useful, but to me it made evident this thing about being observant of the city, being a collector and beginning to register it, and how that process changes you. I would definitely like to work within the public realm. I think that would be very interesting. I would like to stop working in an informal manner, like this way of me just dropping these things within the city and see what happens. I would like to start working with, I don't know, with the government or with an institution where there are actually certain parameters, but I've always felt that most of the public space that it's designed, they try to do it, they understand public as something that has to be neutral, but I would like to do something that it's very involving and that it actually becomes an extension of people's everyday life, and it's not something like, okay, now we're at a park and we do things different, but it's just something that just, I don't know, flows. So I would definitely like to jump scales. I think it's something necessary to put these tools for everyday living to the test at a different scale, because I think the questions are the same. how do we interact, how do we share space, it has nothing to do, yes, I think at this point I've been talking about the space that one shares with another person almost immediately, but thinking of a public program like a museum or a school or a plaza, the same things happen. There are frictions between bodies, so I think it would be interesting to put it to the test. I think we're at a place where architecture has a high profile, so I'm very interested in that. But I also think that there is something very interesting in like the Aikido martial arts, where when you're fighting a bigger opponent, you can actually use their force to generate your own force and respond harder than the punch that he gave you. So I'm very interested in that, and if there are alternatives, I think there are very interesting and high profile, high budget and high architect projects, but I'm interested in saying, okay, it's great that cities are beginning to have that, and that cities are being almost revived by that, but what can we use that same force, that same popularity of architecture within a very small everyday scale, that it doesn't have to be shown in all the magazines and have this high budget, but that could actually begin to work as acupuncture, where you do a series of interventions, very small interventions in a very punctual place, but that I could actually have an influence in another part of the body. So I would like to think of my practice as an Aikido martial art mixture with acupuncture, where it doesn't have to be so overwhelming, so big, but that you can be just as have a response and be able to activate the seed.